The funeral of a wealthy man turns into an emotional and unexpected reunion with his estranged family, leading to a surprising discovery at the end. Please consider subscribing to the channel to support our projects. Charles Harrington had always been a towering figure in the business world. With his charismatic leadership and strategic acumen, he had built an empire that spanned continents. At 68, he was still at the helm, making decisions that influenced global markets. His wealth was legendary, and his opulent lifestyle was the stuff of envy and admiration. But behind the facade of success, Charles led a life of solitude. His relentless pursuit of business excellence had come at a steep personal cost. Estranged from his children and devoid of genuine personal connections, he lived in a gilded cage of his own making. The vast mansion he called home was often silent, echoing only with the sounds of his solitary routines. The morning he died began like any other. His personal assistant, Margaret, found him in his study, slumped over his desk, a half-written letter in front of him. The suddenness of his death sent shockwaves through the business community and the media. Headlines flashed with news of his passing, and an outpouring of tributes flooded in from industry leaders, politicians, and celebrities who had known him. For his family, however, the news brought a mix of emotions. Sarah, his eldest daughter, had long harbored resentment towards her father for his absence during her formative years. Michael, his middle child, struggled with feelings of inadequacy, constantly living in the shadow of his father's achievements. Emily, the youngest, barely remembered him, her memories tainted by the bitter divorce between Charles and their mother. Despite the complicated feelings, the sense of finality that death brings was inescapable. Charles Harrington, the man who seemed invincible, was no more. The void he left behind was not just a testament to his success, but also a stark reminder of the fractured relationships and missed opportunities that characterized his personal life. As the community mourned the loss of a titan, his family was left to grapple with a legacy far more complex and personal. The day of Charles Harrington's funeral was one filled with somber elegance. The service was held at the grandiose Harrington estate, a testament to his life's work and success. Friends and colleagues from the highest echelons of society filled the vast hall, their murmurs of reminiscence and respect mingling with the soft strains of classical music playing in the background. Lavish floral arrangements adorned the room, each bouquet more extravagant than the last, symbolizing the wealth and influence Charles had amassed over his lifetime. Executives from his numerous companies, politicians he had lobbied, and celebrities who had graced his gala events all paid their respects, sharing stories of his sharp business acumen and the indelible mark he left on their lives. Yet, amidst the sea of familiar faces, there was a notable absence: his family. His children, Sarah, Michael, and Emily, had received the invitations but were hesitant to attend. Years of estrangement and unresolved bitterness loomed large, creating a barrier that even death struggled to dismantle. Their reluctance was palpable. Sarah, the eldest, had spent years nurturing her resentment, unable to forgive her father for his emotional absence. Michael felt a deep ambivalence, his pride and hurt wrestling within him. Emily, the youngest, was torn by memories of a father she barely knew, her feelings a confused mix of longing and detachment. In the end, their absence was a silent testament to the personal cost of Charles's relentless pursuit of success. The lavish funeral, while grand and attended by many, felt incomplete without the presence of those who shared his blood. It was a stark contrast, the public figure mourned by many, and the private man remembered by few. As the eulogies were delivered, highlighting his achievements and contributions, the empty seats reserved for his children spoke volumes, a poignant reminder of the fractured legacy he left behind. Sarah Harrington was in the middle of a typical hectic day at her art gallery when her phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number, one that she would have normally ignored. But something compelled her to answer. "Ms. Harrington? This is Benjamin Reed, your father's attorney." The voice on the other end said, his tone solemn and professional. Sarah felt a mix of emotions at the mention of her father. She hadn't spoken to Charles in years, their relationship fractured by his relentless focus on business at the expense of family. "What can I do for you, Mr. Reed?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm calling regarding your father's funeral. I understand there have been complications within your family, but it's imperative that you and your siblings, Michael and Emily, attend. There is a matter of great importance that needs to be addressed, and it can only be discussed once all of you are present." Sarah's initial reaction was to decline. She had no desire to dredge up old wounds or face her estranged siblings. But there was something in Reed's voice, a sense of urgency and significance that made her pause. "Can you tell me what this is about?" she asked, her curiosity piqued despite herself. "I'm afraid I cannot divulge the details over the phone," Reed replied. "All I can say is that it concerns your father's final wishes, and it's something he was adamant about. Please, Ms. Harrington, consider coming. It's what your father wanted." The call ended with Sarah promising to think about it. She sat in her office, staring at the phone, conflicted. The idea of seeing Michael and Emily again was daunting, but the mystery of her father's last request gnawed at her. As the day wore on, Sarah found herself unable to shake the feeling that she needed to go, if not for her father, then for the answers she had sought for so long. The call had stirred something within her, a blend of duty, curiosity, and perhaps a lingering hope for closure. She knew she had to reach out to her siblings, to convince them to attend. Despite the years of silence and hurt, this unexpected call had set something in motion, something that she couldn't ignore. Sarah arrived first, her anxiety masked by a composed exterior. She found herself gravitating toward the large oak tree at the edge of the lawn, a spot she and her siblings had once played around as children. Michael arrived shortly after, looking as conflicted as she felt. His usual confidence seemed diminished, replaced by a nervous energy. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither knew what to say. The silence was heavy, filled with the weight of years spent apart and the unspoken words that had built a wall between them. "Michael," Sarah finally managed, her voice breaking the silence. "Sarah," he responded, a hesitant nod accompanying his greeting. There was an awkward pause, both searching for the right words to bridge the gap that had formed between them. Emily's arrival interrupted their uneasy exchange. The youngest, she looked almost fragile, her eyes betraying a mixture of sadness and uncertainty. She hesitated at the edge of the gathering, glancing around as if searching for an anchor. "Emily," Sarah called softly, taking a step toward her. Emily's gaze shifted, and she moved forward, joining her siblings under the oak tree. The three of them stood together, a small cluster of estrangement amidst a sea of mourners. The atmosphere was thick with unresolved tensions, each of them burdened by their own grievances and regrets. Their attempts at conversation were stilted, each remark a cautious probe into the emotional minefield that lay between them. They spoke of trivial things, work, the weather, anything to avoid the deeper issues that loomed like shadows. As the service began, they found themselves seated side by side, an awkward semblance of family unity. The eulogies and solemn music filled the air, but their minds were elsewhere, each lost in their own reflections and memories. The presence of their father, even in death, brought to the surface the pain and resentment that had driven them apart. They had come together out of obligation, drawn by the mysterious insistence of the attorney, but the path to reconciliation seemed fraught with difficulty. As the ceremony progressed, Sarah, Michael, and Emily exchanged glances, each silently acknowledging the discomfort and uncertainty of their reunion. The years of separation had not been kind, and the wounds of the past were still raw. In that moment, under the weight of their shared history and the somber reality of their father's passing, they realized that the journey toward healing would be neither simple nor swift. The funeral was just the beginning of a long and challenging path they would have to walk together. After the funeral, the guests gradually dispersed, leaving behind a quieter, more intimate group consisting of Charles Harrington's closest associates and, most notably, his estranged children, Sarah, Michael, and Emily. The lawyer, Benjamin Reed, had arranged for the reading of the will to take place in the grand library of the Harrington mansion. The library was a room that exuded old-world charm, with walls lined with shelves of leather-bound books, heavy wooden furniture, and a large portrait of Charles above the fireplace. The siblings entered the room with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, still processing the emotional weight of the funeral and their uneasy reunion. Benjamin Reed stood at the head of the room, a thick folder in hand. He was a man of about 60, with a kind yet authoritative demeanor. He waited for everyone to settle into their seats before he began. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the quiet rustle of papers and the soft creak of chairs. "Thank you all for coming," Reed started, his voice measured and clear. "Mr. Harrington's will is quite detailed, and there are specific instructions that I must follow precisely. I understand that this is a difficult time for everyone, but I assure you, Charles put a great deal of thought into his final wishes." Sarah, Michael, and Emily exchanged glances, each wrestling with their own thoughts and expectations. They had come here primarily out of a sense of duty and curiosity, wondering how their father's vast fortune would be divided. Money was a secondary concern, yet it loomed large, a tangible representation of the father they had known more through his wealth than his presence. Reed began to read the formal preamble of the will, detailing Charles's assets and accomplishments, but it was evident that this was merely setting the stage for something more significant. The siblings listened intently, their anticipation growing with each passing moment. "As you all know," Reed continued, "Charles Harrington was a man who valued his privacy and his principles. His will reflects his wishes not just regarding the distribution of his wealth, but also his hopes for the future of his family." The room fell silent, the gravity of Reed's words sinking in. This was not going to be a simple division of assets. There was a deeper purpose at play, something that Charles had intended for them to understand and perhaps embrace. Reed paused, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. There are specific conditions and instructions that must be adhered to before any distribution of assets can take place. These instructions are crucial and must be followed to the letter. The siblings' curiosity was piqued, and a sense of unease mixed with intrigue filled the room. They realized that their father had one final plan, one last attempt to influence their lives from beyond the grave. What those instructions entailed remained a mystery, but it was clear that Charles had left them more than just his wealth. He had left them a challenge, one that would force them to confront their past and their fractured relationships. Benjamin Reed cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses, preparing to read a specific letter that Charles had penned himself. He pulled out a handwritten document from the folder, the edges of the paper slightly worn, indicating it had been read and reread multiple times. "This letter," Reed began, "is from your father, Charles Harrington. He wrote it with explicit instructions that it be read to you all together following his passing." The siblings leaned forward, their attention fully captured. Reed unfolded the letter and began to read. "My dear children, Sarah, Michael, and Emily, if you are hearing this, then I have departed this world. I understand that my absence in your lives has left wounds that time alone has not healed. In my later years, I often reflected on the choices I made, and I realize now how much I missed by not being present in your lives. There is something I wish to ask of you, a final request that I hope you will honor. I have arranged for you to spend 1 week together at our family's country house. This place holds many memories from when you were young, and it is my hope that it will provide a space for you to reconnect and perhaps begin to heal the rifts between you. During this week, I ask that you live together, share meals, talk, and revisit the places that meant so much to us all. Only after this period will the remainder of my will be revealed to you. I have left instructions with Mr. Reed to ensure this is carried out as I have described. Know that this request comes from a place of deep regret and a sincere desire to see you come together as a family once more. It is my hope that through this time together, you may find the path to forgiveness and understanding. With all my love, Father. Reed looked up from the letter, his eyes meeting those of the three siblings. The room was silent, each of them processing the heartfelt plea from their father. The idea of spending a week together was daunting, yet the sincerity of Charles's words touched them in a way they hadn't expected. The house of their childhood was a place they had long avoided, filled with both cherished memories and the pain of their family's fracturing. Now, it seemed they had no choice but to confront it all head-on. The promise of understanding the rest of the will hung over them, but more pressing was the emotional task their father had set before them. Each of them understood that this was more than just a legal obligation. It was a chance for reconciliation, a final gift from their father in an attempt to mend what had been broken. Reluctant but driven by a mixture of curiosity and duty, Sarah, Michael, and Emily made their way to the family's country house. The journey there was filled with silent contemplation, each sibling lost in their thoughts, unsure of what to expect from this enforced reunion. The house stood at the end of a long, winding road, nestled among tall trees that seemed to guard its secrets. It had been years since any of them had visited, and as they approached, a sense of nostalgia mingled with apprehension. The exterior of the house had aged gracefully, but signs of neglect were evident. Overgrown vines clung to the walls, and the once pristine garden was now a wild tangle of foliage. The sight of the house brought back a flood of memories. Summer afternoons spent playing in the yard, family dinners on the porch, the laughter and warmth that had once filled this place. They unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the musty smell of disuse greeting them. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs adorned the corners of the rooms. The air was heavy with the weight of time and the echoes of their past. The living room was exactly as they remembered, albeit cloaked in a layer of dust. The old fireplace, where they had roasted marshmallows during winter, the large windows that let in streams of sunlight during the day, and the worn-out sofa where they had cuddled up for movie nights, all stood as silent witnesses to the life they had once shared. Sarah ran her fingers over the dusty mantelpiece, finding an old photograph of them as children, smiling and carefree. Michael wandered into the kitchen, where he remembered their mother's cooking and the scent of freshly baked cookies. Emily made her way upstairs, each creaky step a reminder of the games they used to play and the secrets they whispered to each other late at night. The house, though neglected, was filled with remnants of their childhood. The worn furniture, the faded wallpaper, the toys abandoned in a corner. All these items seemed to tell a story of a happier time, before life's complexities had driven them apart. As they began to settle in, they found themselves drawn to these memories, each item sparking conversations and tentative smiles. Despite the initial awkwardness, the familiarity of the house began to work its magic, softening the edges of their estrangement. It was clear that this place held a significant power over them, a power their father had hoped would help them reconnect. The task he had set before them was daunting, but being back in the house where they had once been a family offered a glimmer of hope that perhaps, with time, they could find their way back to each other. As the days unfolded in the old country house, Sarah, Michael, and Emily found themselves drawn to the task of rediscovering the artifacts of their past. Each day, they would explore a different room, unearthing items that had been untouched for years, and with each discovery, a new memory would come rushing back. In the attic, Sarah discovered a dusty box filled with old photographs. She called her siblings, and together they sifted through the snapshots of their childhood. There were pictures of birthday parties, family vacations, and everyday moments that had once seemed insignificant but now felt precious. They laughed at the sight of their younger selves, Michael with his missing front teeth, Emily in her favorite princess dress, and Sarah holding her first art set with pride. One afternoon, Michael stumbled upon a stack of letters hidden in an old drawer in their father's study. These letters were written by their mother, filled with anecdotes about their childhood antics and expressions of love that had been forgotten over the years. Reading through them, they felt a connection to the woman who had been the glue of their family before her untimely death. In the basement, Emily found a box of toys that they had once played with together. She held up a battered teddy bear and smiled, remembering how it had been her constant companion during those early years. They took turns reminiscing about their favorite games, the stories they had invented, and the world they had created in that house. Each object they found served as a bridge to the past, helping them to recall the bond they had shared before life had taken them in different directions. The house, with its creaky floors and familiar smells, seemed to be whispering stories to them, urging them to remember the good times and the love that had once filled its rooms. One evening, while rummaging through the closet in the master bedroom, they found their father's old journals. Hesitant at first, they eventually decided to read them. In the pages, they discovered a side of Charles Harrington they had never known. A man who had deeply regretted his failures as a father, who had longed to bridge the gap between him and his children but had never found the right way to do so. These discoveries stirred a mix of emotions, sadness for the lost time, but also a growing sense of understanding and empathy for their father. The memories they unearthed began to weave a tapestry of their shared history, reminding them of the deep, unbreakable bond that still existed beneath the surface of their estrangement. As the days passed in the country house, the siblings found themselves drawn into deeper conversations. The initial awkwardness began to dissolve, replaced by a genuine curiosity about each other's lives. It started with small talk, but soon they were sharing more intimate details. One evening, they gathered around the old dining table, the same one that had hosted so many family meals in their childhood. Sarah spoke first, opening up about the challenges she faced running her art gallery, the struggles of balancing work and personal life, and the loneliness that sometimes crept in despite her successes. Michael listened intently, nodding in understanding, and then shared his own experiences. He talked about the pressures of his corporate job, the feeling of always trying to measure up to their father's legacy, and the toll it had taken on his mental health. Emily, the quietest of the three, hesitated before she spoke. When she finally did, her voice was soft but steady. She revealed how she had felt lost for years, drifting from one job to another, unsure of her path. The pain of their family's separation had left a void in her life, one she had tried to fill with various distractions but never quite succeeded. They spent hours talking, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, but always listening and understanding. They realized that, despite their differences and the paths their lives had taken, they shared common struggles and emotions. The pain of their estrangement and the regrets of missed opportunities became a focal point of their discussions, and they began to see their father's absence in a new light. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch, Michael and Sarah reminisced about their mother. They laughed about her quirky habits and the warmth she brought into their lives. Emily joined in, sharing a fond memory of their mother's bedtime stories. The shared memories brought a sense of closeness that had been missing for so long. As they continued to share their stories, the barriers that had kept them apart for years slowly started to crumble. They began to forgive each other and themselves for the misunderstandings and grievances of the past. The laughter they shared was genuine, the kind that comes from a place of deep connection and understanding. They cooked meals together, played old board games they found in the attic, and even ventured into the woods behind the house, just like they used to as kids. Each activity, each shared moment, was a step toward healing. The country house, once a silent witness to their fractured family, became a place of reconciliation and renewal. By the end of the week, the tension that had initially marked their reunion had given way to a newfound sense of unity. They were no longer just siblings bound by blood, but friends who understood and supported each other. The time spent together had mended the rifts, allowing them to look forward to a future where they could be a part of each other's lives once more. On the last day of their stay at the country house, the siblings decided to conduct one final, thorough search of the property, feeling a mix of nostalgia and a newfound sense of unity. The house had yielded many memories, but something told them there was still more to uncover. Emily, ever the explorer, suggested they revisit the attic. This time, they were meticulous, going through each box and trunk with care. As they moved an old, dust-covered trunk aside, Emily spotted a small, leather-bound book hidden in a dark corner. It looked worn, the pages slightly yellowed with age. She gently pulled it out and showed it to her siblings. The initials Sage were embossed on the cover. Charles Harrington, gathered around the attic's single, flickering bulb, they opened the diary. The first few pages were filled with business notes and dates, reflecting their father's meticulous nature. But as they delved deeper, the entries became more personal, revealing a side of their father they had never known. Charles had poured his heart into these pages. He wrote about his early years as a father, the joy he felt when each of his children was born, and the dreams he had for their futures. His tone shifted as he chronicled the years of growing distance, expressing his deep regret for prioritizing his business over his family. The words were raw and heartfelt, a stark contrast to the stern, distant man they had known. Sarah read aloud a passage that struck a chord with all of them. "I thought I was building a legacy, something that would secure our family's future. But in my pursuit of success, I lost sight of what truly mattered. I failed as a father, and for that, I am deeply sorry." Tears welled up in their eyes as they continued to read. Charles detailed his sorrow at missing out on important moments in their lives, birthdays, graduations, and even the simple joys of everyday life. He wrote about his hopes for their futures, his dreams that they would find happiness and success in their own ways, and his profound regret for not being there to support them. Then, they reached an entry dated just a few months before his death. This entry was different. It spoke of a secret he had hidden in the house, something meant for them to discover together. "I have hidden something in the house," Charles had written, "a piece of our family history that I hope will remind you of the bond we once shared. It is my hope that discovering it together will help you find the way back to each other." The words were a revelation. They felt as though their father was speaking to them from beyond the grave, guiding them towards reconciliation. The diary had already begun to bridge the emotional chasm between them, revealing the man behind the stern exterior and his genuine desire for their unity. Now, the mention of a hidden secret added a layer of mystery and excitement. Their hearts pounded with anticipation as they exchanged determined glances. What could their father have hidden in the house? And where? The diary had become a treasure map of sorts, leading them towards a final piece of their father's legacy. They decided to split up and search different parts of the house, each taking a section that held the most memories for them. Sarah headed to their father's old study, Michael to the basement, and Emily to the garage, where they had once played on rainy days. Hours passed, filled with the sounds of drawers opening, boxes being shifted, and the occasional call out when one of them found something interesting but ultimately unrelated. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of purpose and unity that they hadn't felt in years. In the late afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the floor, Emily shouted from the garage, "I think I found something." Sarah and Michael rushed to her side. In the back corner of the garage, behind an old workbench, was a small, locked chest. It was unassuming, yet the lock indicated it held something of value. Emily held up a small key she had found taped under the workbench. With trembling hands, she inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The chest clicked open, and inside, they found a collection of items wrapped in a soft cloth. The space was small but meticulously organized, with shelves lining the walls and a large table in the center. It was clear that this room had been created with great care and intention. On the shelves were boxes and albums, each carefully labeled with dates and names. The siblings began to explore, opening boxes to find stacks of letters, photographs, and home videos. The letters were heartfelt, written by Charles to his children at various points in their lives. He had never sent these letters, but they revealed his thoughts, regrets, and deep love for his family. The photographs captured precious moments they had long forgotten. Birthdays, holidays, everyday life moments that had seemed mundane at the time but now held immense value. There were pictures of their mother, smiling warmly, and candid shots of the siblings playing together, their laughter frozen in time. On the table, they found a projector and several reels of film. Michael set up the projector, and they watched in awe as videos of their childhood played on the wall. They saw themselves as children, their father behind the camera, narrating their activities with pride and love. It was a glimpse into the past, filled with joy and togetherness that they had lost over the years. Amidst the letters and photos, they discovered a small, handwritten note from Charles. It read, "The true wealth lies here, not in the money or the business, but in the memories we made and the love we shared. I hope you can find your way back to each other and cherish what truly matters." The realization hit them with profound clarity. Their father had amassed great material wealth, but he understood that the real treasure was the love and memories of their family. This secret room, filled with tokens of their shared history, was his way of reminding them of that truth. The siblings stood in silence for a moment, overwhelmed by the depth of their father's message. They felt a mixture of sorrow for the time lost and gratitude for the chance to reconnect. The room, with its carefully preserved memories, was a testament to their father's true legacy, a legacy of love, regret, and the hope for reconciliation. In that hidden room, surrounded by the artifacts of their past, Sarah, Michael, and Emily found a renewed sense of connection. Their father's final gift had not only brought them back to their childhood home, but also back to each other. As the week drew to a close, the siblings found themselves once again in the grand library of the Harrington estate. The atmosphere was markedly different from their initial arrival. The days spent together, uncovering memories and reconciling their past, had softened their hearts and rekindled a sense of family. Benjamin Reed, the family attorney, entered the room with the same calm demeanor, but a hint of warmth in his eyes. He could see the change in the siblings, the subtle signs of their newfound closeness. He took his place at the head of the table and began to speak. "Thank you all for honoring Charles's request and spending this week together. I can see it has had a significant impact on you," Reed began, looking at each of them in turn. "Now, it's time to reveal the final part of your father's will." He opened a thick envelope and pulled out the official document. Charles Harrington's fortune, as you know, is considerable. He has specified that it be divided equally among the three of you. This includes his businesses, investments, properties, and liquid assets. But there is more that he wished to convey. Reed paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. The siblings listened intently, their emotions already stirred by the week's revelations. In addition to the financial inheritance, Charles left a personal message for each of you. These messages are meant to guide you as you move forward. He handed each of them a sealed envelope with their names written in their father's handwriting. With trembling hands, they opened their letters and read silently. The letters contained personal reflections, advice, and expressions of love that Charles had never managed to convey in life. He acknowledged his mistakes, praised their individual strengths, and encouraged them to support one another. Tears welled up in their eyes as they read their father's final words. The letters were filled with a deep understanding and a genuine desire for their happiness and unity. Reed continued, "Your father's true legacy, as he expressed in his diary and in these letters, is not the wealth he accumulated, but the bond between you. He believed that the greatest gift he could leave you was the opportunity to rebuild your relationships and cherish the love that binds you as a family." Sarah, Michael, and Emily looked at each other, tears streaming down their faces. The magnitude of their father's intentions hit them fully. Despite his faults and the distance he had created, Charles had spent his final years trying to mend the rift and ensure that his children would not make the same mistakes. "Your father hoped that this week together would help you see that," Reed said gently, "and from what I can see, it has." The siblings stood up, moving instinctively towards each other. They embraced, holding on tightly, their tears now mixed with a sense of relief and hope. The weight of their past grievances seemed to lift, replaced by a renewed commitment to each other. In that moment, they realized that they had been given a second chance. The fortune they inherited was substantial, but it paled in comparison to the emotional and relational wealth they had rediscovered. Their father's true legacy was this reconnection, the love that had been buried but not extinguished. As they left the library, stepping out into the sunlight, they felt a sense of peace and purpose. They knew there would be challenges ahead, but they also knew they could face them together. The future was unwritten, but with the lessons learned and the bonds renewed, they felt ready to embrace it as a family once more.